An archer is not a unit holding a bow, it is a role in your formations. Check out the playlist running through all of the units being distilled into 8 simple unit types and how they interact with each other. Going through our series, we've done the top 10 of all the infantry, and now we're kicking off the missile units with archers, and this is going to be an area quite close to my heart. We're not just going to go through the top 10 units, we're going to go into some of the more nuanced mechanics, but also even the top 3 archer stacks in the game, because there's been some debate, and we're going to just mix this with a combination of science as well as utility based on the rosters of the factions they're in. Now, in the defensive and offensive infantry videos, we went through all of the melee stats, and guess what? We don't need those at all for our archers. Some archers can be good hybrid units, and we'll talk, touch on that a bit later, but most importantly, we don't really care about melee stats. Terrible armor, terrible melee attack and defense, and we don't care. A good formation will have this unit specialize in what it does, a specialized front line protecting a specialized back line. And let's dive into the duties, because the number one duty of the archer unit type is to volley over defensive infantry. It's absolutely no secret and no coincidence the easiest factions to use in this game have a great access to archer-based units. Their ease of use allows them to fulfill their second duty, which is delivering high volume of low damage fire. We're dealing a large area of low damage shots. This is the opposite to the sister unit of the archer, which is the gunpowder unit, which is specialized in doing high volumes of damage at a pinpoint target that is necessary to down lords, heroes, or even some armored monsters. However, if you have a whole line of gunpowder units, they can get overwhelmed by swarms. What archers tend to lack in armor piercing damage, they make up for in high volume of saturation. And finally, by not requiring line of sight, these constant barrages of arrows will hammer down the enemy leadership, fulfilling duty number 3, which is continuously damaging the enemy morale. For this precise reason as well is why you should also prioritize disabling the enemy range capability by either focus firing on their range units with yours, or by sending offensive infantry or cavalry after them to stop them from shooting at you. As always, this video will be laced with bonus tips throughout the video, so we don't bombard you with too much at once. But just starting off with our first tip, always keep your archers shooting. I've seen some terrible advice that you should keep your archers at the front and then volley a few times and move back. That is a terrible, terrible idea. You have literally lost valuable seconds where your archers could have been reloading and firing more shots, turning around, walking back, and then shooting forward again. Archers should always be shooting. For this reason, always have guard mode off, so when a unit routes and runs away, you don't chase after them. They want to be staying still, shooting, 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 break a unit, change target, shoot, 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 and so forth. Unless you won the battle, they should not be chasing after enemies, and unless your archer can fire on the run whilst moving, they should never ever have skirmish mode on. Again, check out the main video in this playlist, it will explain all of that. So we've understood that melee stats don't matter, but which stats do? Well, quite easily and quite obviously, it's going to be missile strength and range. Now, the Empire crossbowman is the best blank slate of what a solid crossbow unit is. This is the measuring stick that everything should really be compared to. We have 18 missile strength and only 9 of it is armor piercing, but only the elven factions really get armor piercing arrows because they imbue them with bullshit and magic. But outside of that, don't expect armor piercing. You are after a high volume of low armor piercing shots. Range, of course, is very important. Being outranged by the enemy archers means you're going to have to shuffle your entire formation forward in order to start scoring shots, and this is why Dark Elves are significantly harder to play, because you need to advance the whole formation up to protect your archers. 160 range is spot on. Anything less, you want something to compensate for that, but no archer is bad. The best thing about archers is they're cheap, they're easy to use, and they'll almost always make every battle a little bit better for you. I mean, we have, for example, the Bretonnian archers. They are very good at what they do, particularly poison, which slows the enemy. Also, army context is very, very key. A race like the Greenskins that want to be advancing are going to be punished far less with 140 range and basically doing the same damage as an Empire archer would do. Ruglud's armored orcs are a fantastic unit. They're a regiment of renown, but you can get them, of course, good at melee, but as well as they are basically as effective as any human crossbowman, being able to use 160 range and all of that typical damage. Now, because we like doing a spicy take at number 10, and that is the Salamander Hunting Pack. And why is that? Well, it's only got 140 range, so that's a bit less than we'd like, but it does have some pretty solid missile strength. It deals anti-large damage, so we're normally using archers to take care of infantry, but with that much damage, we will certainly clear infantry quite well. It can also be used very nimbly and basically doubles as a skirmish unit. However, we also have some chameleon skinks out here fulfilling that skirmish role quite adequately. And remember, our number one duty is firing over the top of our defensive infantry, over the top of our sword spears. And I would only ever hire 2 units, 3 at absolute most of this unit, but as you can see, it is able to deal some damage over the top. This is the problem of when you have a very shallow arc, is you might get a bit of friendly fire, but you're also going to be able to score a bit more damage as the enemy does approach, so you don't need this unit because the Lizardmen are very, very flexible. You might choose to use flying units to do some range damage instead, but here we go. We can see our shots are arcing over the top, and we can maybe focus down. Just say we really don't like this unit of orcs right here. Let's focus down on them. But here's another thing we can do, because this unit almost works as a pseudo skirmish unit, and that is to shoot enemies in the flank. Run them up the flanks and then shoot the enemy in the sides and in the rear, because if they have shields, right now that shielded unit will be able to use its shield against this ranged unit. From the sides and from the rear, they can't. In number 9, we have everyone's favorite Empire of Man. We have the crossbowmen. So not necessarily an elite unit by any stretch of the imagination, but certainly one that is very, very dependable, and in my mind is an absolute staple to the early game. But not just any crossbowmen. We are going to be selecting the Stir River Patrol crossbowmen, the Empire State Troop variant. And why is that? Well, it's just a little bit better. If we compare the unit cards side by side, we have 2 additional missile damage, but more importantly, we have suppressing fire. This will reduce the enemy speed by 30%. Anything that slows the enemy on approach will give your gunpowder units more time to do their damage and allow you set up your counterattacks, your counter volleys, and even get your cavalry in position to smash into that anvil. We're going to use the 2 hollow diamond formations, missing someone in the back line here, but you could throw a unit of mortars here to fill that gap. But in the front, we have gunpowder units, of course, Free Company Militia. They do need direct line of sight, which is why we have our archers behind to volley over the top, fulfilling one of those key duties. They'll be able to volley over the top and land into our front line of defensive infantry, and in the rear we of course have defensive infantry being halberdiers, and they can certainly check and shred enemy cavalry, but also in the later stages they can pose as offensive infantry, coming around and then slamming into the flanks and then hopefully grinding down the enemy. Of course, we have some Empire cavalry here, the Empire Knights. Look at that, we are slowing the enemy down with the Stir River Patrol. They are now suffering with a negative 30% to their movement, giving our gunpowder units here a little more time to shoot. Let's focus one down, and this is what we can do. Let's focus down this unit, and then our other hotkey, let's focus down this ranged unit here. Once they're broken, and this is a tip for fighting Skaven, they can be really tricky because they keep on breaking and keep on re-engaging. Once you've broken one, change target. Just keep on breaking them. If you have chance, keep on laying on that fire and you will shatter them. So break them 3 times, they'll shatter, or just keep on pounding them when they're already broken and they will shatter. And of course, our archers will gain lots of experience because they're safely behind the back line, which means you are definitely worth investing in good archer units. Number 8, it's time to shine Kislev, renowned for being a very flexible and hybrid-centric army with units that can tend to punch pretty well in melee as well as be ranged. You could honestly place their basic Kossar unit almost anywhere on this list because it is so cheap, so affordable, and they can actually brawl pretty damn well with melee attack and defense in the 20s. But we're going to focus down on what is their best range unit. Without a doubt, it is the Ice Guard with the glaives. The glaives will give them defense against large as well as just give them a bit more bite. You've basically got so much gunpowder and arrows in this faction, you don't need the dual wielding swords variant. Stick with the glaive, it will hit like a ton of bricks. As typical, they don't have armor piercing, but you don't need them to. They're now fulfilling 2 roles in your army, which is what makes this unit so good. So have a look at the formation we've chosen. A nice basic simple 2 hollow diamonds formation, and at the front we have Streltsy, a gunpowder unit which is able to shred the enemy on approach, firing shots in between our defensive infantry infantry, the Tsar Guard here, so nice open volleys here with only single entities to get in the way and potentially tie up the enemy for your gunpowder. But behind them, we're saving some money by using some basic Kossars, a very cheap unit, but their arrows, they're not quite as good as the Ice Guard, but they're still dealing pretty good damage, and even if you're in the mid or early late game, this extra kick to your economy can absolutely help, particularly if you've got some experience on these Kossars in the early stages of the game. But we have the Ice Guard here in the rear of the formation, but also we have them back here in the far corners, forming our defensive infantry role. So anyone that does come, they're going to have to eat arrows from basically all of these units, and then we can stretch out and then intercept them, bracing with the halberds, making them regret ever coming our way. So using the gunpowder units to focus where they have line of sight, and then choosing our range units to volley over the top of our front line. And as we said before, if we can have the opportunity to shoot into the back of an armored or shielded enemy, this will be shots that they cannot block because they aren't obviously facing us and making use of their shields, and shots straight into their back, they can't stop them. Number 7, Exalted Pink Horrors of Tzeentch. This unit might surprise some people, making it quite high on here, but when you look at the stats and the utility, if used properly, it can work pretty damn well. Now, it's got a bit of a odd reputation. Some people are obsessed with spamming armies full of it, and the reality is you aren't going to do that well unless you, say, got the Blue Scribes or some other huge buffs on them. They are a support unit just like anything else, but they can support themselves pretty damn nice. I mean, they work the exact same way as regular Pink Horrors. This unit has 20 shots of magical damage. It also has flaming attacks, but that will go straight through any physical resistance. 7 out of 24 of its damage is armor piercing, so not great, but also far from terrible. Definitely better than average. But we've also got very strong melee stats here. I mean, 38 melee defense and 30 melee attack. This unit is not going anywhere, but over 7,000 hit points and nearly 2,000 barrier, which keeps on replenishing. So this unit is an absolute pain to get rid of. It's one of those units that when you do use it, you think, and when you have to fight against it, you can get quite annoyed. Just keep on focusing it, because remember, it's a demon. It's not breaking. It will keep fighting until it evaporates back to hell. In typical demon fashion, it does cause fear and has 20% physical resistance, so this unit is just really quite sturdy, and what it does lack in range, it makes up for in several other ways. And let's not overlook its ability to enhance your winds of magic. We want 2 units of 3, and we're going to move the center one and back in both cases, and these units can volley over anything. Now, in front of them, let's put the Tzeentch Flamers. This is more of almost a gunpowder style unit because it requires direct line of sight, and it definitely has a very short range. Now, in front, not of our gunpowder units, but in front of our archer units, this is where we place our defensive infantry, so they will intercept the enemy before they run into us. And then, of course, on the rear of your formation, you also need some defensive infantry to basically counter any flanking units. So that's kind of the staple of how any formation is roughly made. You can have your artillery piece down the back, and of course at the front, your single entity heroes are pretty damn handy to have here because they can tangle with enemy units and not really obscure the line of sight of your gunpowder. But now they're quite reluctant to shoot when you have a unit engaged, so you might need to pull that hero away from the enemy unit for your units to feel comfortable targeting. So if you're wondering why they're not shooting, peel your unit away and they'll go, cool, clear, bang. Now when you do have a shorter range army like this is where having flying units can be absolutely indispensable, able to basically occupy the enemy range units so they aren't outranging you. If they do outrange you, you just have to shunt the formation forward till you can get in range. But often the better idea is to try and send a couple of rogue units up, preferably cavalry if you have them, or this is where you use your flying units like we have done so right here. I don't want to use spells because it'll distract from what the formation's doing, but as we expected, we have our gunpowder unit, our flamer unit shooting straight ahead, nothing obscuring them, but over the top of them and our defensive infantry, we have our humble archer units, in this case our exalted. Number 6, we have the ever popular Quarreler from the Dwarven roster. This unit is such a staple and so effective, not just because it is great in its own right, but also you'll be fighting a lot of greenskins, which means again a lot of typically more lower armored units but in high volume. So this is where your gunpowder might not be able to deal with it, but a thick blanket of arrows just continually whittling those numbers down is going to be the solution for you. So this unit, 160 range, 18 damage, all fairly standard stuff, but what makes it stand out is, well, first of all, it's a dwarf holding it, so 28 melee defense. You will make them pretty damn angry before you scare them off, thanks to also having 64 leadership, very high for basically a backline unit. But what makes them incredibly infuriating for anyone on the receiving end is 80 armor and 35% block, meaning you've got to really dedicate a lot of firepower to them to deal damage, let alone break them. You're usually better trying to outflank this unit than try to trade with it. The normal great weapons version, you should never take that. However, they do have a Grudge Settler variant, and why is this good? Well, because its missiles also deal anti-infantry. Put the shielded Quarrelers up the front and this Grudge Settler one down the back. If anyone does flank you, they can hit with some great weapon damage, but that great weapon will do a bit of extra anti-infantry, but their arrows, more importantly, have shield breaker. It will lower the enemy chance to block by 24. That's really good. Now, honorable mention here, hot take. The Iron Drake with Troll Hammer torpedoes. This is an armor-piercing lobshot style unit, but it does fall under the archer category based on these 8 unit types. Skaven fans rejoice, about time you made it into one of these lists, and here we have one of the most interesting and at least hilarious units to use in the game. In my mind is the Death Globe Bombardiers. They are just insanely powerful. They do have a short range of only 85, but you do use them in the exact same method, albeit a little bit more defensively, of course. I mean, look at the range of those archers, that's a little bit scary. So we're going to pull them back, deselect them, and move everyone else up, just keeping them out of range of the enemy. And then we'll take guard mode off some of our rats here, holding shift to waypoint them and attack the enemy. In campaign, of course, you'll have some menace belows, but then attacking, making sure you get the charge bonus in on all of the enemy units. But what you want with this unit is to find the enemy blobbed up and then blow them to pieces. And bang, look at that. You will lose some Skaven slaves. I know, as a Skaven player, taking friendly fire is a huge pain to your heart, but you might need to break a few eggs to make an omelette. But sometimes, if you position properly, you will get shots into the flank of the enemy, like so. And these aren't arrows, these are bombs. They can't block these with their shield, so enjoy that and all that comes with it. Now, the Regiment Renowned version of this is an absolute war crime. Number 4, the Celestial Dragon Crossbows, a powerhouse unit which couples very nicely to their accompanying Celestial Dragon Halberds, and it's pretty damn easy to see why. A stock standard 160 range, but hitting it with 26 missile damage, and of course that is mostly armor piercing, very useful until the end game. They essentially double tap and fire 2 bolts, rocking 95 armor, 35% block chance. This unit is very hard to displace. You need to be using cavalry and other units to try and break them apart, but that's really damn hard to do when you are playing as Cathay, who are basically renowned for their formations. You are using the harmony bonus from having Celestial Dragon Guard around the perimeter of your army, and this will be giving not only them a bonus from the archers, but the archers will in turn be receiving the harmony bonus, giving them extra reload skill, meaning better accuracy, well, better speed in reloading, so more damage. Now, when it comes to removing really large enemy threats like monsters, you might not have gunpowder units and you might rely on arrows, and as you can see, flying units are quite nimble and are able to avoid the arc of fire. So how can we make things a bit easier for our archers? Well, first of all, we can try to pin the enemy in place, like so, and do so right in front of our archers, giving them a nice clear line of sight, holding the enemy still. This allows your slower arrows more chance to land really devastating damage, and whilst they're a bit slower, he has regeneration. They cannot compete with the sheer power of these armor-piercing bolts from these elite archers. The Dark Elves are close to my heart, and it gives me great pleasure to announce the Shades are the number 4 best archer in all of Total War Warhammer 3, and I've got to say, from this point on, there is head and shoulders above the rest. You can argue Celestial Dragon Crossbowmen, when they get their synergy with the Harmony bonus, put them up onto this echelon, but really, spoiler alert, it's quite elf-centric above here. Probably doesn't surprise you because the elves use their arrows for their armor piercing, doubling almost as their gunpowder utility. But this unit is deceptively good because it has 30 damage, most of it being armor piercing. It can also stalk, Vanguard deploy. This unit can be thrust right up the field and it can be mass produced very, very easily with your Black Arcs. The thing is, some units don't work so well when they're mass produced and need a lot of synergy, but this unit is absolutely savage. These are the most elite of elite Dark Elves, wielding bows, nimble, essentially just dark evil ninjas. The stalk really is what makes this unit so flexible. Whilst this 130 range does look limiting, as the campaign does progress, you can get rework crossbows and other technologies, as well as the skill of your general, which will increase this range, and they'll be able to trade and win with Empire or anyone else. Let's have some role-playing fun. The Black Arc is pulled up to port and we're now disembarking with our elite army ready to take on these nasty pirates. Do not underestimate the power of Hydras. They are such a great complementary unit. They will do really great things, and whilst they are visible, they will attract the enemy to you, meaning your archers can stay well hidden and just deal incredible amounts of armor piercing damage. And the fact they can still trade with the enemy quite favorably once they close that gap means you have nothing to worry about. This is an incredible unit, and basically any stack of the Dark Elves that is half to 3/4 of this is one of the best archer units in the game. Be sure to support them with whatever you're facing. The other units should be used to oppose whatever you are fighting against. If you're versing greenskins which don't have a lot of range, then Sisters of Slaughter could be that unit. But an honourable mention for Dark Shards. Dark Shards are also a fantastic unit. Run them in the typical hollow diamond formation, but in the first one here, throw a shield on, and if you want to save some money, you don't need to put shields on the rear units, but feel free to otherwise. Take the time to not let them walk on top of each other. See this? There we go. Now shoot. So taking the time to line up your shots and don't just let everyone gang pile on top of each other. If that is happening, find a unit that's maybe on top of another. Just say this guy was on top there. I don't like that. Just that one unit. Hold Alt, Control, tilt him around, and then position him that way. Finally, I get to cover this unit. I've heard it brought up a fair few times, but the way to utilize it to its maximum potential is one of the best kept secrets, and I'm really stoked to show it today. It's arguably the second best archer stack you can possibly make, but being fair, it's probably the third, but man, it is close. We're talking about when you go in campaign, the right general, the right combination of buffs under the right faction. What is the envelope that can push it the most? There is only arguably one or two higher than this, but having Eltharion the Grim leading his sentinels of Astaril, unique to the Everest faction. They are fantastic because they have the shield breaker ability, meaning they will lower the block chance of the enemy. They have a whopping 215 range, and their calibration range is at 86% of that. Normally it's only about 75%, so meaning they are accurate up to about 85% of this range, so that is enormous. They'll need that because the enemy's probably largely moved a lot. In melee, they can hold their own with anti-large. Think of them as essentially super Lothan Seaguard with excellent range. They're basically the snipers of the High Elf army. They wield a shield with 80 armor, blocking 55% of all missiles. This unit is one you can essentially spam with your whole army, but of course you would want your Knights of Torqueval, another unique unit. I mean, these Griffin Riders are just epic. I mean, they're way too cool. They're expensive as hell, but I gladly send myself broke with at least 2 units of them because they're that freaking cool. So how do we use these guys? The tip is their weakness is their reload speed. There is one spell that everyone sleeps on, and that is Hand of Glory. I know what you're thinking. 4 Winds of Magic just to increase one archer's shooting, not worth it. But in campaign, once you get his equipment, you can overcast this with Eltharion for 2 Winds of Magic. Again and again and again, and this increases the firepower of 1. Just pick your highest level sentinel and just keep on unloading. Even better if you want to have, I like to have even a couple of high mages. One is fire because I like the Sun Dragon mount, but even getting a secondary mage of high magic to layer this on. Double tap to overcast, Hand of Glory, and let's do it. And we can see, look at that damage. It's flown up to 76 because the reload speed has increased their rate of fire. Now, that's just letting them wonder to us. All those units are shielded as well, so they're blocking a third of what we're doing. And fair enough, they are only skeletons. But what happens when we focus fire on some archers? Let's see how they like that. And the answer is not very much. So we're ready to overcast again. Shoot here, and shoot here. I mean, they delete like it's almost made of fire. Really, really good. Sleeper unit, but you would easily miss it if you did not have the Hand of Glory cast on them. So, the Sentinels of Astaril, if they're commanded by Altharion the Grim, they can become the best High Elf stack possible, unless, of course, you have their actual overall best archer, commanded by their best leader, which is, of course, Alariel the Radiant. In campaign, she boosts this unit incredibly so, and of course, many would argue for it to be the #1 spot. It is the Sisters of Avelorn. If you want to place this unit in #1, there's good reason as well, but the reason being 22 damage, the majority being armor piercing, 180 range. Remember, you're lucky if you get 160 with most other factions, so you're outranging most things, bombarding them with heavy damage, and that damage is also magical, so even demons. This is your anti-demon, anti-armor, anti-freaking everything weapon, and overall they're also incredibly well trained. If your formation gets hit, they can at least hold their own for long enough with 38 melee defense, 36 melee attack. They are the epitome of high elf grace. They are just awesome. Of course, they're elves, they're a bit squishy, less than 7,000 hit points and only 40 armor, but that doesn't matter because they will hold anyone still with this 38 melee defense long enough to blast them to pieces with the other Sisters of Avelorn. It is really hard to break through. To keep the stack affordable, you don't need to go all Sisters. When you hire them, they take 2 turns, right? Have 1 barracks, you only need 1 at tier 3 in your entire empire, and use this 1 barracks to globally recruit some Silver and Guard. They will globally recruit in 2 turns, the Sisters hire in 2 turns, it hasn't slowed you down. Really great way of making a really dependable front line to support your Sisters of Avelorn. And on the flanks, we've got a mage on a Sun Dragon to bring fire magic. We have an Arcane Phoenix to take out enemy heroes and lords. And then, of course, we have Alariel herself. And as the enemy approach, they're regretting all of their life choices. And as usual, you can hotkey them if you like and focus down 1 unit at a time. Now, the best thing about being the High Elves is that you can outrange almost anything that they would have. So what we'll do is we'll first outrange their melee units until their ranged units get into range. Silver and Guard, providing a good front line. And man, just focusing on units with this unit is just disgusting. It just literally evaporates them. And nothing is going to trade with Sisters of Avelorn except for the #1 unit on this list. Of course, the crown is going to the Wood Elves, and let's see their progression. They have one of the best basic units in the game in the Glade Guard. It is fantastic, able to at least move forward and fire at the same time, so this really suits the playstyle of just having a formation that is always moving forward and advancing. And the Deepwood Scout, I wouldn't worry about the regular version, but if you are versing demons, the Swift Shiver Shards are going to give you magical attacks to bypass their physical resistance. Finally, in #1 spot, we have the mighty Wood Elf Waywatcher, the epitome of everything an archer could possibly be. So good, it even crosses into being a skirmish unit as well as an archer. This unit can really do it all. Being a Wood Elf, it's relatively savage comparatively in melee and can stand its own ground. They're hippies, so they're not wearing that many clothes, so the hit points are a problem, but it's very easy to overlook that when you've got 190 range, you can fire whilst moving, which is basically the linchpin of what makes this such a powerful unit. It is able to Vanguard deploy, has Hawkish Precision to improve its capabilities even more, and it's dealing 27 armor piercing damage, all from the safety of running away and dealing it with a 190 range. Last thing to note is there's only 60 elves per unit. However, look at this loose formation. This means that spells like Burning Head, Area of Effect really struggles to hit them. You need to get them in melee and force them into a mosh pit that way to deal big Area of Effect damage. And let's not forget, in campaign, Hell hath no fury like the Wood Elves in their own forest. Do not ever take them on in their own forest. They gain all the buffs from their heroes, from the trees, and it is an absolute nightmare. Make sure you bring a ton of dynamite if you're going to take them on. Now normally you don't want skirmish mode on, however the Wood Elves are one army where you can have most of their archers with skirmish mode on and it's not going to hurt them. In fact, it might even help frustrate the enemy into making some mistakes. But there is very, very little the enemy can do. And now what's even more difficult to deal with is if you bring a few ancient treemen, they can pin the enemy in place. And I mean, the treemen alone are very hard to deal with. This is how you play Wood Elves. Deal with their physical weakness and take advantage of their massive range damage by fielding monsters to do the brawny stuff and allowing your arrows just to make mincemeat. I mean, look at this. It's not even funny for them. The units which happen to have shields, I like having a few Hawk Riders which can fly behind and then even get a dive to get a bit of cycle charging on. And their damage is so great. They can even take down, I mean, look at the damage they're doing to single entities. They're just so reliable. Can't say enough good things about this unit. I know Sisters of Avelorn on paper look like the premier unit, but if you are able to utilize movement, utilize strategy, and the tools at your disposal, the Wood Elves are very difficult to beat, particularly in their own territory. You aren't going to last very long. And that's it for this video. Next time, tune in, we'll be going through the gunpowder units, and this time we'll be going more into the mechanics of how aiming, calibration, and all that good stuff works. So when you see some of these units with relatively similar stats, you'll be able to understand why they're different and why they have their own unique uses. But hope you're enjoying the series. Please consider liking and subbing. Check out the playlist up here, or even check out the tier list of the Wood Elves down here. Catch you next time.